What if a small metal sphere that fell from the sky was not just a mysterious object, but something that could actually think on its own? It may sound like the plot of a science fiction movie, but a strange metal sphere discovered in Buga, Colombia, has raised exactly this question among scientists around the world. The story began with a mysterious event, when witnesses reported a brilliant light streaking across the night sky. Moments later, a perfectly round metal sphere was found, resting in the middle of a field. Before we explore this mystery in detail, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the Truth Decode, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next investigation. At first glance, it appeared ordinary. But the deeper scientists investigated, the more impossible the mystery became. They tried to cut it open. They scanned it using advanced equipment. They analyzed the metal and searched for clues about its origin. Yet every test only created more questions. Then researchers discovered a series of strange symbols engraved on its surface. No language expert could read them. No computer system could decode them. It was as if the symbols had been created for something other than human understanding. But everything changed when the name Bob Lazar entered the investigation. What he believed this sphere might be sent shockwaves through the research community. Was it simply a machine? A piece of unknown technology? Or could it actually be functioning like a living system? Some researchers even began asking a question that sounds almost unbelievable. What if this sphere is not just an object? What if it is a system that has been waiting to activate? And if it has already started waking up, what happens next? Could this mysterious sphere be connected to something far larger than anyone realizes? Stay with us, because what you're about to hear becomes stranger, darker, and more disturbing with every new discovery. You're watching the Truth Decode, where hidden mysteries, ancient secrets, and unexplained discoveries are brought to light. And by the end of this story, you may never look at a simple metal sphere the same way again. This entire story begins on a quiet night in the Buga region of Colombia. That night, everything seemed completely normal. People were in their homes, the fields were silent, and there was nothing around that could have hinted at a major event. But then, suddenly, a bright flash appeared in the sky. Many people later said it did not look like an ordinary light. It looked more like a burning star moving across the sky at incredible speed. Some thought it might be a meteor, but both its speed and direction seemed unusual. The light remained visible for a few seconds, and then suddenly disappeared. Just moments after the light vanished, a deep thud was heard from the direction of the nearby fields. It was not a loud explosion. Instead, it sounded as if a heavy pressure had been released from beneath the ground. The windows of several homes shook slightly. At that moment, nobody understood what had happened. The night somehow passed, but by morning, people in the village had started talking about the incident. Many villagers went toward the direction from where the sound had come. They thought perhaps an aircraft had crashed, or a large rock had fallen from the sky. But when they reached the location, what they saw left everyone stunned. In the middle of a small crater in the soil was a perfectly round metal sphere. The ground around it looked disturbed, but the sphere itself did not have a single scratch. That was the moment when the mystery of the Buga sphere began, a mystery that would later attract attention from around the world. When the villagers first saw the mysterious sphere, the first thing they noticed was its shape. It was not a crooked stone or a broken piece of metal. It was a perfectly formed sphere. Its size was roughly that of a medicine ball, and its surface looked so smooth that it seemed to have been created using extremely advanced technology. The most surprising part was that if it had really fallen from the sky at such high speed, why was there no visible damage on it? When scientists examined it closely, they found no dent, no crack, and no sign showing that it had passed through the atmosphere under intense friction. Objects that come from space usually show burn marks or scorch marks, but this sphere showed nothing of the sort. People also noticed another strange detail. Even after the sun had risen, the surface remained unusually cold. The surrounding soil was warming up, but the sphere seemed to maintain its own temperature. This was not easy for scientists to explain either. As the investigation continued, several tests were carried out. First, drilling machines were used in an attempt to pierce the surface, but the drill bits slipped off and failed to leave even a mark. After that, diamond cutters were used, tools designed to cut some of the hardest materials in the world. Yet the result was exactly the same. The surface remained completely unaffected. After observing the tests, one metallurgist said that the object was not behaving like any known metal. Even under a microscope, there were no joints, weld lines, or manufacturing marks. The entire sphere appeared to be made from a single piece. It almost seemed as if it had not been manufactured at all, but brought into existence in some completely different way. When scientists were unable to cut through the sphere or understand the metal it was made from, they began observing its behavior more closely. That is when several strange details started to appear, making the mystery even deeper. The first thing scientists noticed was that sunlight was not reflecting from the sphere the way it normally reflects from metal. Usually, when light hits a shiny metal surface, it bounces straight back. But something different seemed to be happening with the Buga sphere. It looked as if the light was bending slightly around its surface. Many people reported seeing a faint halo around the sphere, and the shape of that halo seemed to change, depending on where the observer was standing. At first, scientists considered it to be an optical illusion, but later, tests only increased their doubts. A small generator was placed near the sphere to see whether it would react to an energy source. As soon as the generator was turned on, a very faint humming sound began coming from the sphere. The sound was so quiet that special equipment was needed to detect it. What made it even more interesting was that when the distance of the generator was changed or different power sources were used, the pattern of the humming sound also changed. It almost seemed as if the sphere was sensing the energy around it and responding accordingly. This behavior led scientists to consider the possibility of an electromagnetic reaction. During this time, videos of the sphere spread rapidly across the internet. People around the world began discussing the mystery. Some believed it could be a secret military technology. Others thought it might be a rare meteorite. Meanwhile, many people started linking it to alien technology. Then came the discovery of 24 symbols that changed the course of the entire investigation. By this point, scientists had already realized that the Buga sphere was not an ordinary object. Its metal was unusual, its behavior was unusual, and its response to energy was also far from normal. But the most important turning point in the investigation came when attention shifted to a series of strange markings found on the surface of the sphere. For further examination, the sphere was sent to a secure laboratory in California. There, it was studied by a specialized team led by physicist José Luis Velázquez. Throughout his career, Velázquez had examined many unusual materials and technologies, but even he admitted that he had never seen anything quite like this before. When scientists scanned the outer surface of the sphere at extremely close range, they noticed a thin ring running around its center. Around this ring were a total of 24 symbols. At first glance, they looked somewhat like characters from an ancient language, but a closer inspection revealed that they were completely different. Each symbol repeated in a specific sequence, and between them were 6 small divider marks. The most surprising thing was their precision. There was not even the slightest difference in spacing, size, or orientation between any of the symbols. It looked as though the entire pattern had been created using an extremely precise calculation. Scientists rarely see this level of accuracy in ordinary manufacturing techniques. The symbols were then compared against major language databases around the world. From modern languages to scripts, thousands of years old, every possible comparison was made. But the results were surprising. No known language matched them. They did not resemble an alphabet. They did not look like numbers either. In fact, they did not even appear to follow the structure of any common coding system. The more they were studied, the clearer it became that these markings were not decorative. There was definitely a pattern within them, but their purpose remained unknown. Scientists began to suspect that the symbols might be directly connected to the sphere's actual function. At that point, the direction of the investigation started to change completely. The question was no longer where the sphere had come from. The real question had become, what do these 24 symbols actually mean, and why were they created with such extraordinary care? After the discovery of the 24 symbols, the biggest question in the minds of scientists was what might be hidden inside the sphere. If it was some kind of machine, then there had to be a mechanical system inside it. To find the answer, a series of advanced scans was carried out. The first step was X-ray scans. Normally, such scans clearly reveal metal components, wires, or internal structures. But what appeared inside the Buga sphere surprised the scientists. There were no gears, no motors, and no electronic parts like those found in ordinary machines. After that, technologies such as neutron scans and magnetic mapping were used. These tests provided an even clearer picture of the internal structure. Scientists observed multiple layers inside the sphere. However, these layers did not look like metal sheets. Instead, they appeared more similar to biological tissue. Some experts even compared them to muscle fibers. The layers were arranged in an extremely organized manner, almost as if a living structure had been compressed and placed inside the sphere. For the first time, several scientists suggested that the object did not appear to be entirely mechanical. There seemed to be something organic about it. While it was not identical to living tissue, its structure was very different from conventional engineering. The most mysterious discovery was found at the center of the sphere. Scans revealed a dark central node, whose true structure could not be clearly identified. From this node, an entire branching network of copper-like filaments extended outward. These thin strands spread in different directions, connected with one another, and then divided again. The pattern reminded scientists of the neural pathways found in the human brain. Just as neurons are connected to one another inside the brain, a similar network seemed to exist within the sphere. And perhaps the most interesting detail was that the geometry of this entire network closely resembled the harmonic patterns often seen in living cells and natural structures. What did the AI see in the symbols that frightened scientists? After seeing the strange structure inside the sphere, scientists once again turned their attention to the 24 symbols. They had started to suspect that these markings might be connected to the network hidden inside the sphere. The problem, however, was that no human or computer system had been able to understand the symbols. That was when artificial intelligence was brought into the investigation. Scientists fed all 24 symbols into AI pattern recognition systems. At first, they expected the AI to find a connection to an ancient language, a mathematical code, or some unknown script. But the results surprised the entire team. The AI discovered that the sequence of the 24 symbols closely resembled a specific biological pattern. And this was not just any ordinary pattern. It appeared similar to the charge layout of a 24 amino acid neurotransmitter, or neuropeptide. In simple terms, neuropeptides are biological signaling molecules that help carry messages between cells in a living body. This may sound ordinary, but for scientists, it was an astonishing discovery. The symbols on the sphere did not match any language or number system, yet their pattern closely resembled the signal structure used in a living biological system. According to the AI analysis, the similarity was so precise that it was difficult to dismiss it as a coincidence. At that point, scientists began asking a new question. If these symbols resemble a biological signaling system, could they be giving some kind of instructions? In living organisms, similar molecules are responsible for controlling many important functions. They influence growth, play a role in memory formation, regulate movement, and activate or deactivate various chemical control systems. Slowly, a surprising possibility started to emerge. Perhaps these symbols were never created to hide a message. Maybe they were never meant to be read by humans at all. They were not letters from a language. Instead, they appeared to be part of a process. This became one of the biggest revelations of the entire investigation. Scientists started to believe that the symbols on the surface of the sphere were not a message. They might actually be instructions that tell the system inside the sphere when and how to operate. And if the symbols were not meant to be read, then what was their real purpose? Was the sphere controlling itself? After the AI report arrived, the investigation had completely shifted in a new direction. Scientists were no longer trying to read the symbols as if they were a language. Instead, their interest was growing around the possibility that these symbols might be controlling some process taking place inside the sphere. As more data was analyzed, a new theory began to emerge. Some researchers believed that the sphere might contain some kind of internal operating system. However, this was not a system based on software and hardware like a conventional computer. Its structure appeared to be something entirely different. Scientists noticed that there seemed to be a connection between the symbols on the outer surface and the structure hidden inside the sphere. Gradually, the idea became stronger that these markings were not there simply for identification. It was possible that they were actually functioning as the sphere's control layer. In other words, the instructions for the sphere might have been written directly on its surface. This is where discussions about biological programming began. In living organisms, DNA and various chemical signals tell the body when to grow, when to respond, and when to adapt to changes. Some scientists started to think that the sphere might be operating in a similar way. The only difference was that, instead of cells, an unknown structure seemed to be carrying out the process. This possibility raised another major question. Was the sphere controlling itself? Was it not waiting for external commands, but instead operating according to rules already built within it? If that was true, then it was something far more complex than an ordinary machine. Inside the laboratory, a major debate had now begun. Some researchers argued that the symbols were a message that simply had not been understood yet. Others believed that they were not part of a message at all, but part of a process. In other words, they were not created to be read. They were created to make the sphere function. What did Bob Lazar see upon his arrival that others failed to see? While scientists were trying to understand the sphere's symbols, its internal structure, and the AI report, they had started to feel that they were getting close to something much bigger. But for every answer they found, even more new questions appeared. It was during this stage of the investigation that a name entered the discussion. A name that had been associated for years with mysterious technologies and UFO debates. Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar first became known around the world when he claimed that he had worked at a highly secret facility, studying craft and propulsion systems that were far beyond conventional science. Many people questioned his claims, while others believed that the technologies he described were highly unusual. That is why, when the early reports about the Buga sphere reached him, he immediately became interested. The sphere's electromagnetic readings and its strange internal structure especially caught his attention. He already had experience hearing about and studying materials and systems that did not behave like ordinary metals. According to reports, Lazar carefully reviewed the information related to the sphere. He examined images of the symbols, scans of the copper network, and the dark node located at the center of the sphere. After spending considerable time studying the data, he proposed a very different possibility. He stated that the sphere did not look like a vehicle, a weapon, or an energy storage system. In his view, it could be a type of field modulator, a system designed to control and influence the energy or fields around it. Lazar also suggested that some advanced systems do not operate through buttons or switches. Instead, they function through patterns. Because of this, he began viewing the symbols on the sphere not as a language, but as operational commands. According to him, the patterns on the surface and the copper network inside could be directly connected. He also did not see the copper-like filaments spread throughout the sphere as ordinary wires. To him, the structure resembled a neural network capable of receiving and processing signals. He issued a particular warning about the dark central node. In his opinion, it could be the most important part of the sphere, the component responsible for controlling the entire system. At the end of his initial analysis, Lazar made a statement that completely changed the atmosphere inside the laboratory. He said that, in his view, the sphere was not built to move, fly, or store energy. In his words, it was built to think. How did Lazar crack the sphere's operating code? Bob Lazar's early observations had already pushed the investigation in a completely new direction. Scientists were no longer looking at the sphere as just a mysterious object. They were now trying to understand the connection between the symbols on its surface and the copper network hidden inside it. And this is where Lazar's biggest discovery began. Lazar first started looking for a relationship between the symbols and the branch-like structure inside the sphere. He noticed that the network of copper-like filaments spread throughout different parts of the sphere, and in several areas, its patterns seemed to match the symbols on the surface. It could have been a coincidence, but Lazar took it seriously. He then began a series of electromagnetic tests. Different frequencies were generated around the sphere, and the changes taking place inside it were carefully recorded. After some time, an interesting pattern emerged. Every time a specific frequency was used, a particular pathway inside the copper network became active. What was even more surprising was that each active pathway appeared to be connected to a specific symbol. After many tests, Lazar identified a total of 24 different response patterns. In other words, 24 symbols and 24 responses. This convinced him that the symbols were not part of a language, but were more likely commands within a system. His attention then turned to the 6 divider marks located between the symbols. During repeated testing, he noticed that whenever the system reached one of these dividers, the internal activity returned to the starting point. It seemed to function like a reset system. After each cycle was completed, the sphere began repeating the same sequence again. Gradually, Lazar started understanding the entire sequence. He even built a small prototype model using copper wire and ordinary metal. It was not identical to the real sphere, but it was able to reproduce the same response pattern. When the model showed the same cycle and reset behavior, Lazar became convinced that he was on the right track. He called the entire system a geometric operating script. According to him, the symbols were functioning as commands, the copper network was behaving like a processor, and the different frequencies were acting as triggers. In other words, the sphere was running a complete program without any computer chip, circuit board, or software. This was the biggest scientific breakthrough of the investigation so far. For the first time, there was a model that could explain how the sphere might work. But once Lazar understood what the system was doing, he realized something even more surprising. After understanding the sphere's operating pattern, the investigation reached a stage where things seemed stranger than ever before. The question was no longer how the sphere worked. The real question was what it had actually been built to do. During the investigation, Lazar paid special attention to one deform.